Good morning, everyone. My name is Bob Bennett, and I'm the Executive Director at Summer Street. This is Keith Appleton. He's our board chair. We'll be your co-MCs today. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also want to acknowledge that people of African descent have been in Nova Scotia for over 400 years, and we honor and offer gratitude to those ancestors of African descent who came before us to this land. At this time, I'll turn it over to Keith.
Excuse me. Good morning. Welcome to Summer Street. I'm pleased that you're all able to be here today to learn about the role that Summer Street plays in the community and the role it played when Hurricane Fiona struck. That's when Summer Street Industries became a climate comfort center, providing snacks, hot meals, and charging stations for individuals and for cleanup crews here in Pictou County, and later developed into an overnight emergency shelter. I want to share with you just how wonderful it was for us to be able to position people with diverse abilities to help families in their time of need. Be it hot chocolate, coffee, or tea, a bowl of soup and a sandwich, or just chat with someone while their cell phones were charging. Our participants have told us many times that they want to help people less fortunate than themselves and give back to the community. And that, my friends, is what we did because we were a fully accessible comfort center in our community. With Hurricane Lee having just impacted many Atlantic Canadian communities not even a week ago, and on the somber one-year mark of Hurricane Fiona, the realities of climate-induced weather emergencies on this region could not be more evident. There is no question of the importance of climate comfort centers to communities before, during, and after weather crisis. To talk more about the importance of these centers, I'm very pleased to introduce to you the Honorable Gudie Hutchings, Minister of Rural Economic Development and Minister responsible for ACOA. As a proud Newfoundlander, I know Minister Hutchings is as concerned about the impacts of extreme weather events on Atlantic Canada as we all are. Please join me in welcoming Minister Hutchings.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for those kind words, Keith and Bob. It's a pleasure to be here. Look, my colleague and dear friend, and no stranger to you in the room, Sean, the tall fellow behind me, Sean Fraser, has spoken to me about the work that's done here, and to come and see it in person is truly amazing. And of course, to hear about how you stepped up in Fiona. And Mayor, nice to have you with us. Mayor Dix, I know there, okay, in the back of the room. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here with us, Nancy. Bonjour tous. You know, as Keith alluded to, friends, we're nearly a year from the anniversary, and we usually say anniversaries are things to celebrate, but I think this anniversary is one to realize that, yeah, Fiona hit nearly a year ago. And we're here on a site that was so critical to helping people in need at that time. And you stepped up for the well-being of the people of New Glasgow and in the surrounding area. And you opened your doors as a climate comfort center. That's not really what you were designed to be, but you certainly stepped up and to help people in desperate need. And, you know, none of us were expecting the destruction that we saw outside when we stepped outside after that storm. Look, we're Atlantic Canadians. We're people of the sea. We know storms, but we'd never experienced a hurricane like that. Hopefully we never again, but sadly we know that climate change is real. Look, Fiona battered Eastern Canada, our friends in the Quebec shores as well. And the damage that it caused was truly significant, and it disrupted everyone's lives for weeks. And in some places, I know here in Nova Scotia, you lost power for weeks as well. So for many people and families, having access to designated climate comfort centers like this, it meant a place to get a warm meal, as Keith said, a hot coffee, charge your phones, and connect with your family and your loved ones that were certainly worried about you. And it also gave you a place to bring your pets. As Sean knows, I'm a big dog lover, and the impact that Fiona had in my riding on the southwest coast of Newfoundland, that was the number 2 thing on day 2. It was like, oh my God, people left, but nobody had any pet food. So it's amazing those details that happen when we're challenged with a catastrophe like we are. So we know that climate centers are critical to providing folks with safety and security they need at a devastating time. And look, they help maintain the social fabric of who we are as Atlantic Canadians, because we always step up in times of crisis, right? So Fiona reminded us that we can't ignore the disaster that severe climate-related weather events like hurricanes and floods and fires can unleash, and the severe damage that comes with that. This current hurricane season understandably brings anxiety, most recently as Tropical Storm Lee swept through Atlantic provinces, but thankfully it wasn't so bad as we had forecast, but we always have to be prepared. And we don't really get sometimes the mental anguish that it brings. I know I was in my riding a few weeks ago and a young 10-year-old girl came up to talk to me, and I know her family well. And whenever she sees that there's a storm forecast, she literally starts to tremble because she saw her friend's house wash out to sea. So the mental anguish and the anxiety and the PTSD that these storms bring too was something that we've got to be cognizant of. And we know how important it is to have these centers to support residents in the event of future climates. And it's important for communities and people to be prepared when another climate incident hits our shores, so we can stay safe and get back to regular life as quickly as possible. And look, you folks in Nova Scotia, my God, you've been hit so hard. You've had the last year, you've had Hurricane Fiona, you've had fires, you've had storms, you've had tragic loss. And when we see the torrential rains that you had down in our colleague Cody Blose's riding down in the Annapolis Valley, tragic loss of 4 individuals. My God, it brings it just so close to home how we've got to address that. We know, everyone in this room knows that climate change is real, and you all know the impacts are real. So over the past year, one of the key lessons we learned is that the importance of being prepared and having climate centers that are properly equipped to support their communities is vital. So folks, look, we know the oceans are rising, the water temperatures are warmer in the oceans, hurricanes are stronger, and they're more deadly than we've seen before. We're seeing extreme periods of drought, we're seeing record rainfalls, and incredible coastal erosion. We are feeling the effects of climate change, and we need to be prepared for anything and everything. So that's why I'm delighted to be here today with my colleague and friend Sean to announce that our government is providing financial support of up to $9 million to help communities in areas where Hurricane Fiona hit. This investment through the Hurricane Fiona Recovery Fund will help existing community infrastructures and buildings be ready as climate comfort centers so they are prepared with all the equipment they need. This could include acquiring generators, communications equipment, blankets, cots, basic emergency tools, and other items that volunteers and community leaders deem necessary to provide a safe, secure, and well-equipped and welcoming comfort center. To ensure we get as many projects going as soon as possible, priority consideration will be given to applications received by November 17th, 2023. This will ensure that the much-needed contributions get in the hands of those who need it quickly. Rest assured, friends, your government is committed to helping communities and businesses impacted by Hurricane Fiona. And look, I want to take a minute and thank the amazing volunteers and first responders in this community and all throughout your local area who work tirelessly to provide safe and ongoing support and comfort for the residents of New Glasgow in any disaster, but especially during Fiona. And you know what? That's the way we are, isn't it, in Atlantic Canadians? In Atlantic Canada, we always step up and we help those who are down and out. So friends, please know that your government of Canada is by your side as we anticipate. And now we're going to help you prepare to be able to tackle future events. Our government has your back. We always have, and we always will. Thank you for coming today. Merci à tous.
Thank you, Minister. Now I'd like to turn things over to the Honorable Sean Fraser.
Look, let me start by saying thank you to the crew at Summer Street. I know this is a big day for the organization with the scramble going on. And for those of you who might be tuning in, or those of you who are visiting us today, this is an organization that does incredible work to support individuals with intellectual disabilities in our community. And the community routinely during this event every year has the capacity to raise sometimes a few $100,000 to support the extraordinary work. Huge congratulations to the team here. And I just value you guys every day. Today's announcement is good news for our community, but it's not one that fills me with joy and excitement the same way we do when we're building some new community center. It's a somber reminder of the serious impacts that climate change has on our community. Over the course of the past 12 months, we've seen Hurricane Fiona devastate our community. We've seen wildfires in Nova Scotia at a degree that we've never experienced before. We've seen floods in parts of the province that have taken loved ones from families forever. The impacts of climate change are real and they are serious, and they're having an impact on our community. We're very fortunate to have community organizations like Summer Street and others right across the province that have stepped up to help people during their time of need. I had an opportunity in the wake of Hurricane Fiona, when our family was without power for a couple of weeks, to pop in, charge the phone, get a cup of coffee, but more importantly, talk to the people who were here. People who told me that they lost all the food that they had in their refrigerator, people who had nowhere to go, people whose homes were damaged and were not safe to remain in. Today's announcement of $9 million is going to have a major impact on the ability of organizations like Summer Street, but more importantly, comfort centers across regions that were impacted by last year's hurricane to support people who have nowhere to go, to support people by providing food, comfort, shelter, when they may be displaced from their homes. Sadly, this is the reality that climate change is having an impact on our communities. It requires us not only to mitigate the impact of climate change by reducing our emissions, but by adapting to it by ensuring people have access to services during their time of need. This $9 million is going to go a long way, and I see a number of municipal leaders in the room who are going to have a major impact. Because we're going to have to work with municipalities in Nova Scotia and across regions that were impacted to identify the organizations and the local infrastructure that will benefit. We'll be taking applications in the months ahead that will establish who's going to be receiving monies, but it's going to rely on municipal partners to identify the organizations that will be designated as comfort centers and to identify what kinds of equipment those centers need in order to serve vulnerable people who are displaced or impacted by severe weather events as a result of climate change. This is part of the path forward, making sure we're preparing communities for the impacts of climate change, but having seen our ability to pull it off the ground with the team here at Summer Street being a perfect example, gives me faith that we're going to be able to partner with you to continue to support people in their time of need. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Now I'd like to ask Mayor Nancy Dix to come up and say a few words, please.
Minister Hutchings, Minister Fraser, Bob, fellow municipal leaders, Summer Street staff, and clients. Wonderful to be here. Actually, it's wonderful to be at Summer Street anytime. It's one of the hubs of our community and just the nicest place to be. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the importance of strategic funding opportunities which invest in the well-being of communities. As a region that suffered greatly from the impacts of Hurricane Fiona, with extended power outages, damaged infrastructure, downed trees, telecommunication interruptions, we understand the need for comfort centers that can serve and accommodate the needs of citizens during extreme weather events. Fiona was devastating to our community, and many of our citizens continue to recover as home renovations and roofs continue to be repaired. When citizens experience significant property damage due to weather events and their homes may be unsafe to stay in, they need safe spaces for their well-being and support to continue to address their everyday needs. Comfort centers not only provide the basic needs during this time, but also create a welcoming environment for neighbors and friends to gather and support each other, which is good for mental health. New Glasgow was very appreciative to have Summer Street available for our citizens as it served as a comfort center with warm food, power changing options for electronics and basic supplies that may have been needed. It was evident following the recovery from Fiona that many communities needed to make significant investment in emergency preparedness in the future to ensure they could continue to respond to weather impact emergencies. It is truly wonderful to have the federal government identifying this as a critical role that they can play with local communities to support their citizens and future well-being. Again, a big thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Nancy. And that, my friends,
People
whoops,
tuned
sorry.
in, you.
Hang on, sorry. Thank you, Nancy. Greatly appreciated. And that, my friends, is what we did because we were a fully accessible comfort center in our community. That concludes our announcement. And now I would like to invite Naomi Sharp to the podium.
Thank you, Bob. Merci. My name is Naomi Sharp from Macoa Communications. Je m'appelle Naomi Sharp de Unité de Communication de la PACA. We will now begin the media Q&A portion of the event. Nous allons maintenant commencer la partie de l'environnement consacrée aux questions des médias. Some quick housekeeping items. Please note that the audience microphones, cameras, and chat abilities have been disabled. We will open it up to questions from the media who are here with us on location first, followed by questions from those joining us on Zoom. For those participating on Zoom, please raise your hand, and once called upon, you will be unmuted. Please wait a few seconds before speaking to ensure that we hear your full question. I invite media to post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen if that is your preference. When you ask a question, please indicate your name, what media outlet you are from, and to whom you are directing your question. Each media outlet is permitted one question and one follow-up question. Quelques petites mises au point. Veuillez noter que les micros et les caméras et la fonction de clavardage des participants ont été désactivés pour cet événement. Nous commencerons par répondre aux questions des médias présents sur place, puis à celles des personnes qui nous rejoignent sur Zoom. Pour ceux et celles qui participent sur Zoom, veuillez lever la main et une fois appelé, vous ne serez pas mis en sourdine. Veuillez attendre quelques secondes avant de prendre la parole afin d'entendre toutes votre question. Lorsque vous posez une question, veuillez indiquer votre nom, le média auquel vous appartenez et la personne à laquelle vous adressez votre question. Chaque média peut poser une question et une question complémentaire. We will now begin taking questions, starting with one from the floor, please, if there's any. Okay. We will now take a question from anyone participating on Zoom. Merci, et nous allons prendre la première question de Zoom. Okay. We will go with CBC Nova Scotia has a question.
Hi, just confirming you can hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's Taryn Grant with CBC. I'd like to put a question to Bob with Summer Street. Can you please explain how you set your center up to be a climate comfort center last year, and whether or not you'll be applying for any of this money to better prepare the center to be a comfort center again in the future?
Sure, yeah, we were able to be a comfort center because we had a generator in place that was funded partially by the provincial government a few years before that for us. We also have the buy-in from the local municipal unit, the town of Glasgow, who maintains it for us. So that's very easy for us that way, because I know nothing about generators. I know when the lights come on or when they don't, and that's about it. That kind of stuff. So that's how we got it, and that's how we do it. And yes, we will apply because we have two facilities in our campus, so to speak. One is connected to the generator and one is not. And during Fiona, we started as a comfort center, but after a couple of days, we were also an emergency shelter. And so there was like 150 cots put in the other building, and so that people would have that needed it had a place to sleep, to be honest. That was done in cooperation with the Salvation Army and that kind of thing, and the Red Cross, I believe. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And for my follow-up, I think this is probably for one of the ministers for some specifics about the program. As I understand it, this is coming from that $300 million that was announced last year for the recovery fund. How much of that money has already been spent or allocated, and how much is left?
Thank you for the question. Look, we stepped up during the hurricane, of course, with first and foremost when the provinces and reached out with declaring an emergency. It was things were covered under the disaster financial assistance arrangements between the province and the federal government. So this money was put into ACOA to disseminate for the things and the areas that were not covered under the disaster financial assistance arrangement. There was $100 million that was set aside to deal with wharf infrastructure that wasn't included under the DFFA. There was $40 million for aquaculture businesses. There was money for Parks Canada. There was money for Indigenous Services Canada. There was money for communities that again fell through the cracks. And we saw the need of how groups like Somerset stepped up, and we saw what it cost them to be stepping up and looking after their communities. So we said, we're going to take a few $1 million and make sure that these organizations are ready and prepared for the next one. So there's not very much money left, but most of it is spent now.
You have a specific figure on how much is left?
Not exactly, no.
Okay, thank you. And now we will go to Kevin Doucette with the Canadian Press. Keith, sorry. Keith, can you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's from Minister Hutchings. I'm wondering how much you can. People have been complaining that they still haven't seen any money that they've applied for. How quickly can you tell us the rest of the money will go out?
That's a great question, Keith. So under the disaster financial assistance arrangement, I know Minister Blair at the time did disseminate money to the provinces to get out to the people in need. So it's a complicated formula that's used, but basically the province and the federal government set the perimeters. The money goes to the province and then the province disseminates that money for us. The ACOA money, I can tell you, has gotten out the door very quickly. That's why we've asked for application for this particular pot of money, the $9 million for the comfort stations application to be in by November so that we can get it out the door so these communities are ready and prepared for, sadly, when the next climate disaster hits. So ACOA has done a great job of getting their money out the door. And again, the province is responsible for the majority of the funds that roll through the communities that were responsible for municipal infrastructure, for replacing housing, for roads, bridges, the community infrastructure that was covered under the disaster financial assistance arrangement. All those funds are disseminated through the province.
Yes, and as a follow-up, what is the nature of the monies that are left? You've said what you've targeted. The remaining money, where might it go if people apply for it? You can request for the amount of that's actually left in the pot, but you don't know me very well, but I want to have a little reserve in case something rears its ugly head that wasn't covered under the disaster financial assistance arrangement. That's why we're making sure that we have everybody addressed that did fall through the cracks. So that's why we've announced $9 million for this. There's still a few $1 million left. I want to make sure that everybody that we can help is being helped. But this money will roll out quickly, and then we'll see what is there. I know, look, we all know the prices of things have changed. We had some applications come into ACOA and other sectors that they had the initial quotes done, and then they came back and said, oh my golly, it's going to be a little bit more. So we've been there stepping up to help that. I want to make sure that we have all our commitments honored and people looked after before we shut this fund.
Thank you. And now we'll go to a question from Adrien Blanc.
Bonjour, ma première question sera pour Sean Fraser. Est-ce que vous avez des exemples qui vous tiennent à cœur de soutien d'ACOA dans votre circonscription?
Oui, merci pour la question. Il y a beaucoup des exemples pour ce fonds de soutenir ma communauté. Alors, juste pour exemple, il y a des organisations qui n'a pas l'habilité pour soutenir des personnes qui expérimentent les conséquences des changements climatiques maintenant. Mais c'est possible pour le fonds de soutenir des organisations pour acheter des génératrices pour fournir des lits, des couvertures de la personne qui expérimente les conséquences. Il y a beaucoup de possibilités pour ce fonds pour acheter des équipements nécessaires, des téléphones qui fonctionnent dans l'émergence. Il y a un très grand nombre d'exemples, mais quand j'ai visité des facilités dans ma communauté après l'ouragan dans l'année passée, la solution pour une communauté est différente pour des autres communautés. Les flexibilités avec ce fonds créent des opportunités pour la communauté locale d'identifier la solution locale. Avec 9 millions de dollars dans les petites communautés dans la région atlantique, nous sommes l'habilité pour travailler avec la municipalité, avec des organisations pour fournir des équipements qui sont essentiels pour soutenir des personnes qui ont perdu la nourriture dans le réfrigérateur, qui ont perdu du logement dans l'émergence. Il y a beaucoup d'options. J'ai vu des résultats de le travail de la communauté l'année passée. Et avec ce fonds, c'est possible pour la communauté améliorer l'habilité de répondre pour le prochain événement qui résultat de le changement climatique.
Merci. Et ce fonds semble avoir beaucoup d'avantages. Est-ce qu'il y a un projet de le rendre permanent ou de tirer des leçons permanentes de l'utilisation de ce fonds?
Alors, ces fonds, ce n'est pas permanent, c'est une réponse de l'ouragan Fiona l'année passée, mais nous avons des autres fonds pour soutenir des communautés pour répondre les conséquences des changements climatiques. Alors, juste pour exemple, les fonds dans mon nouveau ministère, en anglais, Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. C'est possible pour des communautés pour font une application pour des contributions du gouvernement fédéral pour éviter les conséquences des changements climatiques. Il y a des autres programmes avec l'habilité pour soutenir des organisations avec le coût de l'équipement pour des émergences. Il y a des autres programmes pour tout notre pays, mais ce fonds est juste pour la réponse de la unique situation avec Fiona, mais c'est possible pour la prochaine génération d'infrastructures pour incluant des projets pour la résilience dans la phase des conséquences des changements climatiques.
Thank you. Now we will go to a question from Jonathan McInnes.
Hi, Jonathan McGinnis, CTV News in Halifax. Fraser, it's regarding the Housing Accelerator Fund. Minister, have you asked city officials in Halifax to alter their application to this fund, and if so, how?
Yes, is the short answer to your question. And let me just, for the benefit of the people who may be listening who aren't familiar with the issue that you've raised. The Housing Accelerator Fund is a major part of our plan nationally to address Canada's national housing crisis. We are living through a national housing crisis, and if we're going to solve it, we have to address the very specific problems that have got us to where we are today. One of them, you'll have seen the recent change to our taxation of home builders by getting rid of the GST altogether for units that will be rented. And I was actually thrilled, and compliments to the provincial government for following suit by doing the same. That was targeted at addressing the financial equation that impacts builders' inability to build, given the rising costs of building, given the higher interest rate environment that we're living through. But one of the other challenges that has led us to a housing shortage in Canada is that cities across Canada have, in many instances, actually made it illegal to build the kinds of homes that we need to build if we're going to solve the national housing crisis. We want cities to legalize housing. I reviewed the Halifax application to the Housing Accelerator Fund, and there was many aspects that were very strong. And I should say over the past 10 years, Halifax has been a leader in growth. It has been the fastest growing downtown core in Canada. Last year, it was the second fastest growing city by population overall. And credit to Mike Savage and council for the work that they're doing to grow Halifax. But I do think we need to push every city to go further. We've asked them to improve certain densification practices within the city by allowing people who own a property to build 4 units on that property without having to go through a rezoning application. We've asked them to further densify the city, in particular around university campuses, to provide more affordable housing for students who are seeking to study in Halifax and live in Halifax at a price that they can actually afford. We've also asked them to make it easier to build taller buildings with more stories, not necessarily just giant towers or standalone single detached homes, but more of those in the middle of the road that are 4 stories high that can provide affordable homes for people in the city, so we can continue to experience the benefits of growth in Halifax, which has been tremendous for the entire province. Since I sent a letter to the city outlining some of the areas that I encourage them to further improve their application, I've actually been in touch with certain officials from the city who are very happy to work together. They want to solve these challenges too, is my experience. And by working together and putting real serious federal cash on the table, we're going to be able to change the way that cities build homes, including in Halifax, and help the city that is the capital of my home province provide more housing for people at prices that they can actually afford.
Possible the city could miss out on this fund if they do not alter their application in time or appropriately?
Look, my goal is to get to a place where we can support Halifax's growth. But of course, until you approve a funding decision, it's possible that cities won't benefit from those funding decisions. My sense, though, is one of optimism because Halifax shares my ambition. My goal is to work with the city of Halifax and, frankly, communities across Canada, including some where municipal representatives in the room have submitted applications to the same fund, to increase the level of ambition so we can actually solve Canada's national housing crisis. I'm going to work with the city with a goal of getting to a place where we can support their growth. And my expectation, given the early conversations I've had, is that they want to be ambitious and they want to partner with us. And I'll look forward to collaborating with them to get to a place where both levels of government can support the extraordinary growth that Halifax has been experiencing and the benefits that accrue to the entire province as a result.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have a question from Jake Boudreau.
Yes, just to clarify, this is specifically for the areas that were impacted by Hurricane Fiona last year. And what are those areas? What geographic area are we looking at?
Yes, you're correct, Jake. It is for areas impacted by Fiona, and I can show them on a map, but I'd read them out to you. It's in Newfoundland and Labrador, it's the southwest coast, Prince Edward Island, of course, the entire island. In Nova Scotia, it's Cape Breton, Inverness, Richmond, Victoria, Antigonish, Guysborough, Pictou, Cumberland, and Colchester. New Brunswick, it's parts of Westmoreland and Kent in the coastal areas. So basically look at the trail of Fiona and where it hit. That's the communities that are included in this. And the Quebec as well, the Ile-de-Madeleine, Quebec.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our final question is from Paul Beacon with All Nova Scotia.
Hello, my question's for Minister Fraser, please. Hi, Minister. Minister, Nova Scotia is going to join the federal government in waiving the GST on new apartment construction. The federal program's for 7 years. The Premier said he was going to reassess after 2. Are you concerned that creates some uncertainty for builders?
First of all, I want to say thank you to Nova Scotia for taking the opportunity to increase its contribution to this policy choice. And I was actually very excited after we made the federal announcement that we would be removing GST from home building for those that would be designed to be rented out. not only because it was going to make an impact at the federal level, but we saw Ontario, British Columbia, Newfoundland and Labrador, and now Nova Scotia all announcing that they're going to do the same. So this is going to significantly reduce the cost. And before I get to the time period you've referred to, I think I owe a big thank you to the provincial leaders who are joining us to get more homes built in Canada. One of the things that I did here when I was speaking to home builders, when I was speaking to nonprofit advocates, was that builders want certainty so they can plan which projects they're going to get done in order to take advantage of these new tax incentives that is going to build more homes for Canadians. Provincial governments are going to make decisions based on what they feel is appropriate, based on what they can afford. A longer period of time does provide more certainty. My hope is that Nova Scotia will find when it conducts its reassessment that this has been an effective tool that spurs more building. To the extent that it has that positive impact, I expect they're going to conclude that it's going to be worth keeping in place. But of course, that's a decision for the provincial government. But my message to those involved in provincial politics today is one of gratitude, stepping up to increase the impact of this tax incentive to get more homes built is the kind of thing that's going to help us solve the housing crisis that we're living through.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, please connect with us through ACOA's Media Relations contact information found at the bottom of the news release. Si vous avez d'autres questions, veuillez communiquer avec nous par le biais des coordonnées de relations avec les médias de l'APACA qui se trouvent au bas du communiqué de presse. This concludes today's event. Ceci conclut notre événement d'aujourd'hui. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you.